John, are
Matt,
are we live?
are we live? I think so. That was cool. Look at you with the technical, the savviness over there, just
I'm
getting
trying to
the
make it better.
countdown and the sound and everything. It's amazing.
Even after last week's fiasco of looking so blurry, I've decided to upgrade and look a little bit on point. I hope it resonates as always. As always, everybody, good morning to another Wake Up and Deliver episode 23. We're bringing some.
You know what? You said it was 23. I'm like, I don't know if it's 23. I think that might be wrong, but you've been doing a good job keeping track, so I'll go with it.
Go with it, John. We're going with it. Anyways, episode 23. As always, we're going to start off by saying thanks for everybody for joining. We can't see who joins like we used to do with the audio, so if you are here, as always, leave us a comment, say hello, or there's a link to join the studio. We'll be more than happy to see you come live. You don't have to put up your video. We don't have to see. You can just come up with audio. It's just as good. We're already getting some good mornings from people, which is fantastic. What I was going to say, we're going to start off like we always start off with some tiny thoughts. And it's going to be John's reaction every single time. I scour the internet every week for the best content to surprise John, and then I'll focus my attention back on because I have a new setup. I'm excited. So, John, your thoughts. Flashy gets attention. Boring gets results. While most chase the views, the greats obsess over the basics.
Yeah. Look at you stealing my move. Okay, so I'm gonna actually I have a mixed bag on that one. So I say, yes and no.
Yeah.
In the sense that 100%, the quality of your business and really, being at that level of excellence comes from mastering the basics and the boring and the stuff that gets no attention. And honestly, I feel like that's been such a huge part of my career. I remember so many meetings being like, can we please get the basics right? And people being like, let's do the flashy thing. And it's like, yeah, okay, it's gonna fail. That being said, though, I think that, you still have to have a mix of that flashiness of that purple cow, because, if to be able to do anything, to be able to connect with consumers, like they have to know you're there, and you have to stand out in some way. But because most people don't realize
this morning on your Starbucks, if you can't get the basics right, doesn't matter how flashy you are.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. So like there's a trade-off in the sense that like you can't just be flashy and suck, like, what I mean, or not be able to execute. Like that doesn't work. What I think is unfortunate, though, especially for the type of work that we do and the general logistics community does overall, is the fact that most people don't realize how hard it is to get the basics just so dialed in. Like they just don't understand. So that's where my mixed bag on that one comes. But I do agree with you 100%. And the Starbucks one's exactly right, in the sense that I had this whole rant. I was going to do this video about it and just say that, hey, if I were, and I have people in my network that are high up in the Starbucks supply chain. So guys, hey, if you want some support, I'm willing, let's go. But yeah, like I would focus really on a really quality DMS system. I would actually probably pare down some of the offerings on the menu and stuff like that. I would try to create a little bit more drive. I think Starbucks, unfortunately, has created some of their own problems, especially with the mobile ordering, allowing people to create whatever kind of crazy drink that they want. And I would do a little bit more to try to take some control so that I could enhance that experience and make people feel good, rather than what's happening more often than not, which is feeling frustrated.
That's I think the what most restaurants are doing now. Even McDonald's said they're moving away from all the fancy stuff and they're just going to focus back on the burger, right? Like they're like, hey, we've tried too many different things. We're just going to focus on what we were made us great. And same as Tim Hortons. I think Tim Hortons has gone off the rocker too and started offering pizza, and that, and everything else.
Pizza. So the second I saw those flatbread pizzas, I was like, God, game over, guys. Get real.
Go back to your basics. Make those sandwiches great again at Tim. I remember back in the day that the sandwiches were phenomenal at Tim Hortons. They were fantastic, and I think they missed the mark by not having that. But we do have some comments. Someone likes your mug, and I think that's Cactus, but we don't see the name. It says LinkedIn user. The mug
This is an authentic Disney Parks mug. This thing is like so old. Like I almost dropped it a couple weeks ago and I was just devastated because it's like you can't order it. It has to come from the parks. And it says, I hate mornings, which is funny because when I was younger and before I had kids, I most certainly was not a morning person. I was a night owl 100% of the time. And then every one of my kids seems to have been a 5 a.m. baby. So my life of not being a morning person ended a long time ago, but I hold on to it with the mug.
You still are a night owl though, because you're still doing everything into the late nights. You just get up early in the morning.
We share in public. Like, no one needs to know what's happening there.
Anyways, on to better things. Some logistics news, a lot going on. You know, the lots of different things going on. Big news this week is obviously the election in the United States, how that's going to affect the supply chain. It's going to have huge impacts. I think we'll do a better recap next week. We'll probably talk a lot more about it. It's good to mention for all the listeners out there, please do go out and vote. It is very important for everybody to vote because it does affect everybody. You know, whoever you vote for, it doesn't really matter. Just please do vote, because I think this is going to come down to a nail biter. As recently in the BC, I don't know if you follow this, in the BC election in Canada, it came down to like 26 votes to some ridings, and that will make or break a government in BC still. So these things are happening. Do go out and vote. On top of that, there's a few topics I wanted to talk about. I know you have a few things that you want to talk about.
I have one rant. That's it.
You want to start off with your rant, or?
Yeah, because it's really just nonsense. And then I just wanted to surprise you, get your take or get your feedback for everybody, and then we'll get into some more quality stuff. Okay, so a couple of things over the, going into last week, through the weekend, and then even again this morning. Like, I get that, everyone's trying to put their stuff out there, and look, you and I do a bunch, we have our opinions. I get that not everyone is right all the time, but man, I am just seeing what I feel is a disproportionate amount of content where people are making statements and claims that honestly are really misguided, and even sometimes, like, I'll say untrue, not in the sense I think they're being malicious or intentionally untrue, but they're wrong. Like, they're just dead wrong. And they're not supported by anything that has come out, study and surveys and information over the last X amount of years. And they're just putting it out there. And I feel bad. And this is what I want, like, your take. I actually feel bad for this, because I want to get on my soapbox and do it, but I'm not trying to be combative or, difficult with anyone. Like I said, I appreciate everyone's putting out their stuff, and it takes a lot of effort to put the content out there. But where do you draw the line between, like, hey, like, you're trying to entice some smaller shippers, some smaller brands, some people that might have family businesses, for example, some people that are carrying 20, 30, 40 employees in their livelihoods. And the stuff that you're telling them is, like, wrong. Like, it's just not true. And it's not the right way that they should be thinking about stuff, because it's like, they're either going to be burning cash or they're going to be doing this. And I keep kind of falling back into this weird domain that, you and I know, because we're kind of on that other side of like, let's say that, like, the content and like whatever. And there's so much pay for play going on where it's like, you can see that people are positioning themselves in a way to then make recommendations where they're getting commission from literally making these introductions, these leads or whatever. And I don't know, I'm having a hard time between, like, where do you just leave it alone versus whatever?
Do you have an example of what you're thinking? Because I'm kind of vague for me.
I do, but I don't. Like I said, I don't really want to call people out. I'll try to
be as vague as possible. Yeah,
I'll put two really broad things out there, maybe just for a context. But like I said, I don't really want to do it in a way that someone could figure it out. One would be like a service provider or whatever, kind of saying, hey, this amount of people or this percentage of people are saying they're willing to do X, and spend the money for X. And honestly, like, every study that has come out is like, that's not true, or that's so far out of context, in the sense of being like, well, yeah, they'll pay for something a little bit more midstream, but they're most certainly not starting to pay into the, sorry, I almost like fell off my chair there. I'm getting so like involved with this. Yeah. Like, they're willing to maybe pay versus like, hey, I don't want this service to last 2 weeks, but I'm most certainly not paying for it to come either next day or whatever. Or I'm not going to pay a premium for it to come next day or something like that. So that was one example. And then the other one was talking about, like, essentially unit economics with certain things. And it's like, no, that's probably the biggest misunderstanding when it comes to operational logistics, both at a warehouse and a transportation, whether it's bulk or last mile, is that everyone seems to take this manufacturing mindset of economies and scale without realizing that most manufacturing equipment has this like really long runway, and they apply it to logistics, like the physical logistics of warehousing, transport, and delivery, that has a much, much shorter like ramp. And you actually go from economies of scale to diseconomies of scale very quickly. And telling people that like, oh yeah, you can take all this trash volume, this low revenue quality volume and get good unit economics. It's like, you most certainly won't. And like pushing shippers to use services that are doing that are the fastest way to end up with a provider that all of a sudden goes bankrupt.
Okay, so I get where you're coming from. I see what you're saying. I don't know if there's a way to stop it unless you're commenting and trying to be a content or a product expert on that subject matter and be like, hey, this is completely inaccurate. But I think
yeah, but it's so combative, because then people just think you're hating. It's like, I'm not hating. I'm trying to make sure that brand that's just doing $1 million or it's finally ramping up, that you don't start bleeding them like $100,000 a year of pure profit with this bad information.
But isn't that capitalism? Isn't that the whole purpose of the company? Isn't that the whole thing of trying to, if it works, it works. It doesn't. How many great companies are out there that do everything properly and nobody knows about them because they're doing X, Y, Z wrong? And this is just another example of another X, Y, Z happening wrong. And it's just part of that life cycle. Like, where did we go wrong? We did this content incorrectly. We brought the wrong attention, and this is how we scaled, and this is why it failed. And we can learn from that. All you can say is, hey, DM the person and be like, hey, listen, I think you're off base on this. And I've had those DMs when I've posted once in a while. Her made a comment the other day to me, and we were chatting. He's like, hey, what's with this content here lately? I'm like, hey, that's what I'm thinking. He goes, and his biggest comment, and I hope I'm not calling him out or anything, was, the challenge with AI, because we're talking AI, which is one topic I want to talk about, is that AI is teaching AI itself now, and all this junk information that's out there is perpetuating itself and making it worse. So it's self-teaching itself on the stuff that it put out and saying, oh, this is what people want and are absorbing, but it's really not. So you're creating all this kind of content back and forth. And it made sense to me. That's why kind of my comment back to him was. And I think this is the same thing. People took something out of context and are just regurgitating it.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think that I for sure that's happening. AI especially, I think, is going to have a really hard time with that, with the creator economy and the attention economy and stuff being so prevalent. I think it's going to be really difficult to contain that, because it's like, how do you stop that feedback loop, essentially? Like, you know what I mean, of what's being spewed out. I think that's true. I think that, sometimes people may not know better. I just have an issue with it when it's like people either presenting themselves like pure SMEs and it's not right, and then they're taking like money and they're taking like the livelihood of these businesses and they're risking it for their own gains. That I have a hard time with. And then the other part is, if they legitimately don't know and then they're speaking on it, and then they're kind of contributing to the same problem, putting more disinformation out there, unintentional, whatever. But it's like, you can just tell by some of those comments, it's like, you've never run that. You've never run that operation day in and day out. You've never actually been responsible for those employees or those trucks or those whatever, those customers. And it's clear, but because now you have this like base of authority or perceived authority, people are believing it, which then compounds it and makes it harder for people that really do know. And, by the time that someone gets burned, then what ends up happening? Oh, that little company then won't trust the next person because they got burned last time by the expert. It's just a vicious cycle.
It is a vicious cycle, but I'm going to segue into another conversation because we could probably spend too much time on this, John.
On my rant.
And I want your focus elsewhere. I want to talk about returns. I know we talked about returns a few months ago. I know you know the context of this story, but we're going to keep that separate. I want to do a contrast of returns, and I want to ask what your thoughts are. Is why is there a difference in returns being accepted in Canada versus the United States? And why are American companies more likely to take on returns? And I already know your answer because we talked about this, versus Canadian companies. And why I think, and I've always been a huge fan of this, returns has to be very seamless and easy. Get customers through the door, get them into your locations, get them buying products, have a very good reverse logistics, or make it part of your loss leader. And I think you'll succeed. But I wanted to hear your take on the contrast of returns between the US and Canada.
Well, I think I think it's the market dynamics, right? So Canada, we have a lot fewer options. We're more limited, right? We're dominated by big box. There's not as much there's not as much competition. You know what I mean? When you really think of the overall market size, we're a smaller economy in general by a lot. So I think it's just competition, right? Returns is used as another way to compete, right? It's another type of service. It's another type of way to entice and attract and de-risk or whatever it is. So, I think policies reflect the current state of the market. And because in the US you have more, you have more players, the competition is more fierce. You have that desire to try to clamor and grab every little bit that you can. Return policies are more lax and they're not having the negative impact that you might see in smaller economies, or like the insulation, where they just, well, there's no other choices anyway. What are you guys going to do? We're going to have more restrictive policies. So I think that's what it is more than anything else.
I think it's going to be continuing. Well, coming into the fourth quarter, obviously with the extended holiday return policies going around, and it's going to become very much an issue for a lot of companies come January. I think a lot of people will be buying and returning, and especially with the stricter policies on returns, whether you have a receipt, gift receipt. A lot of people don't hold on to the gift receipts. It used to be back in the day, we were chatting about this. Back in the day, you'd be able to walk in as long as the SKU was in the system, you're good to return it, and the retailer was happy because they got another product through the door, or they got a gift card or whatever, right?
Yeah, like even something as silly. So Spirit, right? Like, I mean, obviously, like these guys go crazy at Halloween. But imagine the logic of this. So you buy something up until, like, I don't know, the 20th, 24th, something like that. It was like you could return it. After the 24th or something like that, they were saying all sales are final. You could just have in-store credit. But it's like up until, like, so if you're trying to protect against the buy and return from Halloween, and I get that there's some Halloween parties and things like that happen a week before, but realistically, is there that many more people doing that for that party that's a week out or 5 days out, especially when Halloween like falls in the middle of the week or whatever, that they try to buffer it, as opposed to just saying, hey, as long as you're returning it, before the 30th or 31st or whatever. But that's what they were doing. Like, you know what I mean? Just to immediately shift their risk, and because they could, right? At that point, people who were buying it last minute, it was like, well, now I'm going to buy something just because.
Drew says you nailed it. Somebody speaking on SMEs, there is no expert. So I was going back to your earlier comment. Drew's like,
I know, Drew must hate it too, because Drew's like super smart, and like the work he does is like intense, and I can imagine like the amount of like just nonsense that goes on in that automation space. Like, man, I'm surprised you still have your hair, buddy, because like I dealt with probably fewer issues than that, and I clearly don't. So
Okay, moving on to I had a secret request, or a request to talk about this topic. I never heard your thoughts on it. I'm curious about it. I want to hear about your thoughts on electrification of trucks in North America, and if it's going to help the logistics supply chain or it isn't. Is the Tesla Semi something that we should be adapting into? I know a lot of countries are moving into, full electrification. They're not allowing imports of diesels or gasolines anymore. Everybody has to go electric. What do you think, John? Do you think electric semis are the way to kind of solve a lot of the challenges that we're having, or is it kind of like a fool's errand?
Well, what challenges exist right now that someone's like, damn, that's because it's an ICE engine?
Gas prices are really hampering a lot of profitability for a lot of companies. There's a lot less maintenance on the semis than there is on a regular diesel truck. All that whole other economy that sits behind it, right? Like the whole story of
so the world will be better off when all the garages close and all those mechanics have no work. No, look, okay. So before I say that, because
where's the ice transporters nowadays, since we created the freezer? You know what I mean? Like there used to be people that used to haul ice.
1856. Like,
listen, it's a technology. It's out there. What do you want?
No, so look, before anyone like all of a sudden like starts trying to like cancel me because they think I hate the planet. No, 100. Look, I think electrification, I think getting away from fossil fuels totally. Like, look, we're killing the planet. Everyone saw what happened during COVID, how the air quality changed, how the environment changed because of commuting. So there's no doubt that there's a ton of value in moving away from something that has such a negative impact on the environment. So overall, like 100%, I support anything that makes our planet better for our children, our children's children, and every generation that comes after that. With respect to doing it just because of like cost or solving problems, honestly, I think that that's a real mixed bag, because the thing is, right now, electrification is cheaper for the first few people that can get in. Like, they're going to pay more for the vehicles and stuff like that, but you're right, they're going to save on fuel. But the infrastructure for everyone that's running those trucks, the plants, the batteries, mining, all of that stuff. And when everybody needs a grid that has 10 times or 50 times the capacity that it has today, and all of that money starts getting in, those smaller costs for electricity that you see are only going to go up as we move away from fossil fuel that's taking a lot of that energy load right now.
So New Jersey, Maryland, Connecticut, and Delaware have all signed on to get new $250 million to electrify truck charging stations, $250 million to start working on getting electrification as a priority, and to build that infrastructure.
Yeah, like,
right?
It's all good. And I think that, getting there and getting to a world that doesn't rely on fossil fuels and all of that is 100% something that we should keep investing in. I don't think it should be looked at as it's solving the problem of high logistics costs, because it's going to come with its own challenges, right? Like, even if you think about it, these batteries, well, today, for example, outside of a pure break or whatever, you don't have any trucker that stops and has to wait around for an hour, 60 minutes, 90 minutes or whatever to charge his truck. Fueling happens super fast, especially at the like the card lock, the commercial stations, where the flow rate is even faster than a residential, or a consumer station or whatever it is.
You might get some hate messages in a second, because a cat had an experience not long ago driving to Montreal with an electric car, and she was ready to. She had to sit there for like an hour because it wouldn't charge.
No, but that's what I'm saying. So like, I think that
it was a horrible experience. She's like,
but that's what I mean. You're gonna have trade-offs with either wait time, for example. You're gonna have trade-offs with not just the wait time of your charging, but like, do they have enough open bays? Are the people there? What starts happening when dude figures, well, I got to charge my truck, I might as well go have like a 2-hour nap, or I might as well go in there and do some shopping, or do this or do that.
Well, maybe drivers will take their time off, like they're supposed to, not be challenged by shippers and receivers. Be like, hey, I'm sorry, I stopped. I had to go off duty for battery recharge time, right?
Yeah,
and it's going to help create safer roads. I don't know. That's going to probably be a hot topic.
I think it's good overall. I think that if the only reason you're trying to do it is because you want to cut costs, because you're like, oh, fuel's too expensive, I don't think that that's the right motivation. I would love to see people actually, do it for the, the right reasons, which is like saving our planet.
I see another challenge with it as well. The electric grid, not only the sustainability of it, because we have two competing technologies now for the electricity, right? You have AI, which is eating, like, nobody talks about this, how much energy it's eating. They're saying it's like going to reach a 20-30% electricity grid by 2030, where everything is just going to be powering AI.
That's why
it needs
That's why none of these startups are actually running their own models. And when they tell you that they're doing something with AI, they're just leaning into some machine learning already done by Amazon or Google, or they're leaning into OpenAI or Anthropic. No one's making their own stuff, by the way. Anyways, just random. But yeah.
Well, that's why the Amazon report came out recently that AWB it has like huge margins right now because of all the money, everybody that's buying their AI technology. And then they're not even broadcasting it like the other guys. They're quietly doing it in the background. It's moving forward. And on the topic of AI, so one comment I saw on Freight Waves, which I thought was interesting, was AI is coming to trucking. Can it fix factoring for carriers? I was curious on your thoughts. Do you think AI has the ability to help move costs down for carriers by speeding the process of invoicing and all that through the system, or do you think it's just another quick You're laughing at it.
Well, because the thing is that makes the assumption that like the reason why invoicing is slow is because people are like, being ultra diligent with the math, which is BS. The reason why invoicing is slow is because the more cash that a shipper holds on to keeps more money in their bank, they're making more money for interest, their cash flow is better. It has nothing to do with them being like, oh, Steve forgot to carry the two. We got to recheck all these invoices. Like that's not why it's slow.
It's also speed of it. So one of the challenges I always see is carriers have a very slow reaction time to provide PODs and invoices. I often see invoices like 2-3 weeks after delivery date. And then they submit it, and then they have a 30-day or 15-day, whatever terms they have, and it takes another after invoice date to get collect after that point. So they're extending their own process because for whatever reason, if they sped that whole process up, it would help them, not just about carrying over the two, but their whole process of how they invoice and they get their PODs. You're not having it.
Well, only in the sense that like that's because most trucking companies are small, and doing that doing that level of admin is hard. Do I think technology could come around that will help them speed up and get things out faster? Of course, for sure. Do I think though that it's going to change 30, 45, 60, 90-day terms from shippers? Absolutely not. Do I think it's going to change shippers from holding payments for a quarter close or a year-end close or a month-end close? Absolutely not. Because these are all creative accounting tricks that people have been doing for years and years and years, and it's so baked into the systems now. It's not an issue with like I can most certainly tell you that I have never had an issue where my invoices that I approve for my carriers or whatever weren't getting paid on time because of the fact that someone on my team made a math mistake. Like,
yeah, but you came from a large shipper. I don't think it comes from that. And a lot of shippers do push off invoices for whatever reason for small incremental errors versus just adjusting it. Sometimes it's like, HSC or tax is off by this much. You didn't tax this, and your invoice and what it's supposed to be is not calculated. They make you redo it and it reset it from the beginning. So these little incremental errors are sometimes a tactic to help push their own money to keep staying in the bank and then push off your invoice as well. So if you help.
Yeah, I agree. The worst though that I've seen that I really don't like, and I mentioned this to the founder that is doing this company when they asked for my feedback, is a service that was offering, like, have you seen these things like, hey, pay early and get a discount, right? To try to avoid this kind of nonsense of like, really dragging out your terms or not paying on time. Like, have you seen these services yet?
No.
So this is becoming all the rage about like helping procurement teams or helping, shippers or other businesses get lower costs by making this offer to, their partners, whether it's suppliers or service providers or whatever, being like, hey, you've got a $10,000 invoice, but if you want it paid tomorrow, I'll pay you 9, or I'll pay you 8.5, or I'll pay you whatever.
Like a factoring company.
Yeah. But I honestly told them I think shippers will like it, and I think it's absolutely devastating for carriers who are already dealing with so many challenges on price that putting them in a position where they have to take something early to maybe keep their cash flow going or whatever. I was like, I fundamentally think it's the wrong thing to do, even though I think a lot of shippers would be very interested by the software and the program.
I think there's a lot of softwares out there now. Going back to what we were earlier talking about, is they're putting the AI umbrella on a lot of things, and they're saying they're going to solve X, Y, Z without too much understanding of why there's a problem within the system, and they're approaching it maybe from the wrong angle. Sometimes they're approaching it from the shipper's perspective, while they should be approaching it from the carrier's perspective, and sometimes they should be approaching it from the broker perspective of how to kind of solve this issue, and they're just seeing it from their one preview that they have. And it's a bit of a challenge. Sometimes it's a regional issue, right? Like, obviously Canada has different problems than the United States, and we're different problems from Europe, and far different problems from Latin America, and how we approach different payments and et cetera, right? So I think that fundamental thing of once one piece solves all AI, I think that's still a little bit of a challenge for a lot of people, and I don't think it's going to be there. And a lot of these softwares are too much of a niche. The problem is I have 30 softwares that are all great. I'm not going to spend $100,000 a year on the software when I don't have that ROI on it either, right?
Yeah, I definitely think that that's going to be a challenge. And funny enough, like, Shopify exploded and blew up because they had, the let's call it app store or whatever. So many people could get, develop apps and people could plug it into their stores and whatever. And now what ends up happening is that Shopify is taking over and they're building in and baking in a lot of the core functionality from these very popular apps just because of the fact that people had app fatigue, right?
Mhm.
Like, I don't want to have 600 things with either different credentials, different portals, different this, different that, and having to manage it all with different problems to different people. I think AI is very much going to be the same, is that like
Already
everybody's trying
is.
to have their own. Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like everyone has their own little niche, but it's like, guys, like I don't want to have 35 different types of quote unquote AI agents or platforms or this or that. And I most certainly don't want all of those different connections into my data,
Yeah.
you know?
Especially with the
So,
more and more of these breaches and happening on data as well. The more you have opened up to all these different softwares, the more likelihood that you might get breached. The more selective you are, the less likely you're going to
oh,
be. And understanding your internet security is just as vital as anything else, because that could break. Ransomware is like still very prevalent, and we don't hear much about it now, but it still happens to a lot of companies that are held ransom.
mhm.
They get screwed on that, right? Anyways, John, we are at that time. Time flew today. We're at 31 minutes, and you always have the closing thoughts for the week. I start off with my morning coffee thoughts. You end it with something. It's always something on the weak side, I think, but let's see if you can pick it
Always something on the weak side. Wow. No, you know what? I think, I think now you're just going to start watching everything going through. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what people start talking about over the next few weeks. There's been a lot of information coming out that, retailers have overshot their forecast. There's too much product in supply chains that, everyone's is maybe struggling with sales. I think that that's going to be really curious. I'm
Mhm.
super curious too if Amazon is actually going to kick everyone in the teeth and launch their low cost store this month,
Ooh,
because I think that that will just wreak havoc on sales and all kinds of gitchy stuff for the holidays. So
Gitchy
that's
stuff.
cool, gitchy stuff. And then later today, I'm trying to show people. I've got I think around noon or whatever, I've got this post coming out about data and dashboards and really talking about people using CAN versus like their own information,
Yeah.
about this data and using more of your own insights. And I grabbed this like stupid data set from Kaggle like yesterday. And in like half an hour, I just like threw up this really quick dashboard to be like, here's like just different things you can be looking at. Like, what does your CAN thing do? What does it not do or whatever, to try to show people that if they really want to now push past and get into those areas of better performance, you have to really get customized and dialed in for your own business. And thinking some off the shelf basic tool is going to give you deep enough insights is just a fallacy these days.
I agree. Well, on that note, whoever joined us, thank you so much. We don't see who joined us, but everybody who did, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully, you guys like the new platform. We're trying different things to help evolve. It is also on YouTube Live. We're also on LinkedIn Live now. We have a whole bunch of different things, and we're gonna.
And Matt looks so pretty these days because he got himself a new setup. Look at how sharp this guy is. It's just great.
I gotta do my hair in the morning so I can make.
Oh, so do I. It's the biggest part of my day.
And on that note, guys, goodbye, everybody. Thank you so much for joining.
Bye.